How does a marriage shatter in a single night? All captured in the cold delivery of divorce papers. What really happens when your husband stands outside the party and you disappear with someone else, only to realize he's been gathering evidence the whole time? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The divorce papers felt cold in my hands as I stared at the official seal, remembering how it all began just 3 months ago. How does a marriage shatter in a single night? I thought I knew, but Simon had been 3 steps ahead of me the entire time. It started with the Henderson and Associates annual party downtown. I'd been looking forward to it for weeks, a chance to network, to feel appreciated, to be someone other than just Simon's wife or Lila's mother. At 34, I felt invisible in my own life, trapped in suburban routines that suffocated my spirit. "I can drive you," Simon offered that Friday evening, adjusting his glasses as he looked up from his laptop. Numbers and spreadsheets always seemed more interesting to him than I was. "I'll wait outside, bring you home whenever you're ready." The offer irritated me more than it should have. "You don't need to hover, Simon. I'm perfectly capable of getting myself home." "I'm not hovering. I'm being considerate." His voice carried that patient tone that made me feel like a child being managed. "It's downtown. Parking will be terrible, and you'll probably have a few drinks." "Maybe I don't want my husband sitting in the car like a chauffeur," I snapped, immediately regretting the harshness but unable to take it back. "It makes me look pathetic, like I can't handle myself." Simon closed his laptop slowly, his brown eyes studying my face. "When did offering to help become controlling, Evadne?" I turned away, focusing on my reflection in the hallway mirror. The black dress hugged my curves perfectly, and I'd spent an hour on my makeup. I looked good, better than I had in months. "You wouldn't understand. You're happy with your boring routine, your quiet little life. Some of us need more." "More what?" "More everything. More excitement, more appreciation, more life." My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Don't let Simon hold you back tonight, honey. You deserve to have fun." Mom had always thought Simon was too passive for me, too content with mediocrity. She'd never said it directly, but her subtle comments over the years had planted seeds of doubt that were now growing into full-blown resentment. "Fine," Simon said quietly. "I'll drive you, but I'm not doing it to control you, Evadne. I'm doing it because I love you and want you to be safe." The guilt twisted in my stomach, but I pushed it away. "Whatever, just don't make a scene or embarrass me." The drive downtown was tense and silent. Simon found a parking spot across from the venue, a sleek glass building that housed corporate events. Through the windows, I could see people mingling, laughing, living. "I'll text you when I'm ready," I said, not looking at him as I got out. "Have fun," he replied, but his voice sounded hollow. The party was everything I'd hoped for. The Henderson group had spared no expense: an open bar, elegant catering, a jazz trio playing in the corner. I felt alive for the first time in months, surrounded by colleagues who actually seemed interested in what I had to say. That's when I met Callum Mercer. He was tall, confident, with the kind of easy smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He worked for one of Henderson's client companies, and when he approached me at the bar, I felt a thrill I hadn't experienced in years. "You look like someone who's ready to escape," he said, his green eyes twinkling with mischief. "Escape from what?" "Whatever's keeping you from really enjoying yourself. You keep checking your phone, looking toward the door. Boyfriend waiting outside." I laughed, surprised by his perceptiveness. "Husband, actually, in the car." "Ah." He signaled the bartender for 2 more drinks. "The patient type, probably reads while he waits, very understanding, very safe." The description stung because it was so accurate. "How did you know?" "Lucky guess. I'm Callum, by the way." "Evadne." Beautiful name, very unique, like its owner, I suspect. The flattery should have felt cheap, but after months of feeling invisible, it was intoxicating. We talked for an hour, and I found myself laughing more than I had in months. Callum was funny, charming, and most importantly, he made me feel interesting. My phone buzzed repeatedly. Simon texting, asking if I was okay, if I needed anything. Each message felt like a leash tugging me back to reality. "He's worried," I said, showing Callum one of the texts. "Or controlling," Callum replied smoothly. "Does he always monitor you like this?" "He says he's being considerate. There's a fine line between considerate and suffocating, don't you think?" I looked around the party, at all the people who seemed free to enjoy themselves without someone tracking their every move. "Maybe you're right. Tell you what," Callum said, leaning closer. "There's a quieter bar in the hotel next door. Better music, better conversation. What do you say we continue this somewhere more private?" My heart raced. I knew what he was suggesting, and I knew I should say no, but sitting there, feeling desired and appreciated for the first time in months, the word no seemed impossible. "I should tell Simon." "Should you? He's already assumed you'll be here for hours. What's the difference if you're in this building or the next one?" I looked at my phone. 3 more texts from Simon. The last one said, "Take your time. I brought a book. Love you." The sweetness of it made me angry. Why couldn't he be more demanding, more passionate? Why was he always so understanding, so willing to wait? "One drink," I said, my heart pounding. "One drink," Callum agreed, but his smile suggested he expected more. We slipped out a side exit, avoiding the main entrance where Simon would be parked. The hotel bar was dimly lit and intimate, with soft music and private booths. Callum ordered expensive whiskey, and we settled into a corner where no one could see us. "To escape," he said, raising his glass. "To escape," I echoed, and took a sip that burned all the way down. 1 drink became 3. 3 became an invitation to his room. And somewhere between the elevator and his door, I stopped thinking about Simon waiting in the car and started thinking only about myself. My phone died sometime after midnight, or maybe I turned it off. I told myself it didn't matter, that Simon would understand, that I deserved this moment of freedom. But as I lay in Callum's arms in the early morning hours, staring at the ceiling of a hotel room that smelled like expensive cologne and poor decisions, I couldn't shake the image of Simon sitting in our car, checking his phone, wondering where I was. I told myself he'd be fine. He was always fine. Patient, understanding Simon, who never demanded anything, never made scenes, never fought for what he wanted. I had no idea he'd already started fighting for what he needed. I woke up in Callum's hotel room at 6 a.m., panic flooding my system as reality crashed back in. Sunlight streamed through unfamiliar windows, and the events of the previous night hit me like a physical blow. What had I done? Callum was still asleep beside me, his arm thrown casually across the pillow. In the harsh morning light, he looked different, younger, less sophisticated. The magic of the previous evening had evaporated, leaving only the stark reality of my choices. My phone was dead, just as I'd told myself it was. But deep down, I knew I'd turned it off deliberately, not wanting to face Simon's increasingly worried texts. Now, with my stomach churning with guilt and fear, I fumbled for the hotel room charger. 23 missed calls, 37 text messages. The progression told the story of Simon's night. Concern turning to worry. Worry becoming fear. Fear transforming into something else entirely. The last message, sent at 4:17 a.m., was different from the others. "I hope you're safe, Evadne. We'll talk when you get home. No, I love you. No, please call me. Just cold, simple facts." Something in that message made my blood run cold. Callum stirred beside me. "Morning, beautiful. Sleep well?" I was already getting dressed, my hands shaking as I tried to zip my dress. "I have to go. My husband. He's been calling all night." Relax, Callum said, stretching lazily. You're a grown woman. You don't need permission to have a life. You don't understand. Simon's not like that. He doesn't get angry. He doesn't make demands. If he's upset, then maybe it's time he learned to deal with disappointment like the rest of us. The casual cruelty of the comment hit me like a slap. This was the man I'd betrayed my marriage for. This stranger who didn't know me, didn't care about the complexity of my situation, who saw my husband's pain as nothing more than an inconvenience. I have to go, I repeated, grabbing my purse. Will I see you again? Callum asked, but his tone suggested he didn't really care about the answer. I didn't respond. I was already out the door, my heels clicking frantically against the hotel corridor's marble floor. The taxi ride home was torture. I rehearsed explanations, crafted lies, prepared justifications. My phone had died, that was true. I'd lost track of time, also technically true. I'd been networking, making important connections for my career. Simon would understand. He always understood. But when I walked through our front door at 7:30 a.m., still wearing my party dress and smelling like another man's cologne, Simon was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and his laptop open. He looked up when I entered, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not anger. Simon didn't do anger. Something colder, more calculating. Hi, I said, trying for casual but hearing the tremor in my voice. Hi, he replied evenly. My phone died, I said quickly. I'm so sorry. I know you were worried. Holly and some of the other girls went to this after-party thing, and I completely lost track of time. You know how it is when you're having fun and... Evadne. Something in his tone stopped my babbling. Where were you? I told you with Holly and... I called Holly at midnight. She said you'd left the party hours earlier. My stomach dropped. She was probably confused. There were so many people. She was very clear. She said you left around 10:30 with a man she didn't recognize. The kitchen felt like it was spinning. Simon never checked up on me, never questioned my stories. This wasn't like him at all. Simon, you're being paranoid. Holly was drunk. Was she drunk when she posted on Instagram an hour ago? The picture of her and 3 other women at some club downtown. You weren't in any of those photos, Evadne. I stared at him, seeing a stranger in my husband's face. When had quiet, passive Simon become this methodical interrogator? I don't appreciate being treated like a criminal, I said, going on the offensive. I'm a grown woman, and if I want to stay out late... With another man? The words hung in the air between us. I could deny it, but something in Simon's eyes told me he already knew. Instead, I chose attack. How dare you spy on me, calling my friends, checking my social media? This is exactly why I needed space last night. You're suffocating me, Simon. You're so controlling, so paranoid. I was worried about my wife who disappeared for 9 hours without a word. I didn't disappear. I was networking, building my career, trying to be something more than just your housewife. By sleeping with a stranger, the accusation hit like a physical blow. How can you even... But I couldn't finish the lie. The guilt was written all over my face, and Simon could read it clearly. He closed his laptop slowly, deliberately. I sat in that car until 3 a.m., Evadne. 3 a.m., calling hospitals, checking with police, terrified that something had happened to you. Do you know what that feels like? Sitting there, imagining the worst, while your wife is... He couldn't finish the sentence. Simon, please, let me explain. Explain what? Explain how you walked out of that party with another man while I sat outside waiting for you. Explain how you turned off your phone so you wouldn't have to deal with your husband's inconvenient concern. Explain how you came home smelling like someone else. Each word was delivered with surgical precision, cutting deeper than any shouting match ever could. It wasn't like that, I whispered, but we both knew it was exactly like that. What was his name? Simon. What was his name, Evadne? Callum, I whispered. He nodded slowly, as if filing the information away. And you spent the night with him. It wasn't a question. It was a mistake, I said, tears starting to flow. A terrible mistake. I was feeling neglected, invisible. You never pay attention to me anymore. You're always working or reading or... So you decided to fix our marriage by sleeping with someone else. I wasn't thinking clearly. I'd been drinking, and he was charming, and I felt appreciated for the first time in months. While I sat in a car outside, waiting for you. The image was devastating. Patient, loyal Simon, sitting alone in the dark, worried sick, while I was upstairs betraying everything we'd built together. I'm sorry, I sobbed. I'm so sorry. It didn't mean anything. It was just one night, one stupid mistake. Was it? Something in his tone made me look up. What do you mean? I mean, was this really the first time, Evadne? Or just the first time you got caught? Of course it was the first time. How can you even ask that? But Simon was already walking away, leaving me alone in the kitchen with my tears and my lies and the growing realization that I might have just destroyed the best thing in my life. From upstairs, I heard Lila's bedroom door open. Daddy, why is Mummy crying? Simon's voice was gentle when he answered our 8-year-old daughter. Mummy's just sad about something, sweetheart. Why don't you get dressed for breakfast? Is she sad because she didn't come home last night? My blood froze. Lila had noticed. Our little girl had waited for me, had seen that I never came home. We'll talk about it later, okay? Go brush your teeth. I heard Lila's footsteps padding toward the bathroom, and I realized with growing horror that this wasn't just about Simon and me anymore. Our daughter had been affected too. She'd gone to bed wondering where her mother was, had woken up to tension and tears. What kind of mother was I? When Simon came back downstairs, his face was set in stone. We need to talk, he said quietly. But not now. Not in front of Leela. Tonight, after she goes to bed. I nodded, wiping my eyes. Simon, I want you to know. Don't, he said, holding up a hand. Don't say anything else right now. I need time to think. He grabbed his keys from the counter. I'm taking Lila to my mother's for the day. You should clean up. Get some rest. Figure out what you want to say tonight. Where are you going after you drop her off? Out, he said simply. And for the first time in our 10-year marriage, Simon left without telling me where he was going or when he'd be back. As I watched him load our confused daughter into the car, I caught him glancing up at our house with an expression I'd never seen before. He wasn't looking at our home with love or nostalgia. He was looking at it like he was already planning his escape. The next few weeks passed in a strange, tense limbo. Simon was polite but distant, going through the motions of our daily routine, while something fundamental had shifted between us. He spoke to me only when necessary, slept in the guest room, and spent long hours at his office. I tried to convince myself things would return to normal. Simon had always been the forgiving type, the one who avoided conflict and chose peace over confrontation. Surely he'd come around, especially if I showed him how sorry I was. But there were signs that worried me. Little things that seemed insignificant but felt ominous. He'd changed the passwords on our shared accounts. When I asked about it, he said it was for security reasons after a data breach at his firm. Reasonable enough, but he'd never felt the need to keep me out of anything before. He'd also become meticulous about documenting things, our conversations, my whereabouts, even casual comments I made about work or friends. I caught him making notes on his phone after I mentioned going to lunch with Holly, and when I asked about it, he said he was just keeping track of his schedule. Since when do you care about my lunch plans? I'd asked, trying to keep my tone light. Since I realized I don't know as much about your life as I thought I did, he'd replied, and there was something in his voice that made my skin crawl. The worst part was how he acted around other people. In public, Simon was the same devoted husband he'd always been. Attentive, affectionate, concerned about my happiness. But I could feel the performance in it now, the careful calculation behind every gesture. At his mother Janet's birthday dinner, he'd been particularly solicitous, making sure I had everything I needed, laughing at my jokes, touching my hand across the table. To everyone else, we looked like the perfect couple. But when Janet pulled me aside in the kitchen, I realized Simon's performance had a purpose. "You look tired, dear," she said, studying my face with concern. "Is everything all right?" "Just work stress," I lied. "You know how it is." Simon's been working late a lot lately, too. He seems different, more serious. I forced a smile. He's always been serious. It's one of the things I love about him. Janet didn't look convinced. "He asked me to keep Lila more often. Says you both need more time to focus on your careers." That was news to me. "He did. Just last week, wanted to know if I could take her every other weekend, maybe some weeknights." I said of course, but it seemed like an odd request. You've always been such hands-on parents. My stomach twisted. Why was Simon arranging for Lila to be away from home more often? What was he planning? "I should get back," I said quickly. "Don't want to leave the men alone with the dishes too long." Janet laughed. "Simon's been doing dishes since he was 12. That boy was always responsible, always thinking ahead." Always thinking ahead. The phrase echoed in my mind as we drove home that night. "Your mother mentioned you want Lila to stay with her more often," I said carefully. "I thought it might be good for both of them," Simon replied, not taking his eyes off the road. "Mom gets lonely, and Lila loves spending time there. But every other weekend, that seems like a lot." "Does it? I thought you'd appreciate having more free time, more opportunities to network." The way he said network made it clear he wasn't talking about professional connections. "Simon, about that night. We're not discussing this in front of Lila." Our daughter was asleep in the back seat, but Simon's message was clear. Not here, not now, maybe not ever. That's when I decided to take control of the narrative. If Simon was going to be cold and calculating, I'd show everyone who the real victim was. I started small, with comments to my co-workers about how Simon had become distant and controlling. How he questioned my every move, monitored my social media, made me feel like a prisoner in my own marriage. Holly was particularly sympathetic. "I've always thought Simon was too possessive," she said over coffee. "Remember your engagement party? He barely left your side all night." "I thought it was sweet then," I said sadly. "Now I realize it was a red flag." Some men can't handle strong, independent women. They need us to be weak to feel powerful. It felt good to have someone validate my feelings, to confirm that I wasn't the villain in this story. Simon's behavior since that night had been controlling, paranoid, manipulative. I was the one being punished for a single mistake, a moment of weakness that any reasonable person could understand. The story grew in the telling. Simon's reasonable questions became interrogations. His hurt became vindictive cruelty. His need for space became emotional abandonment. "He won't even sleep in the same room as me," I confided to my mother during one of our weekly phone calls. "Over one night, Mom. One night where I stayed out too late and forgot to check in." "That's emotional abuse, honey," Mom said firmly. "Withholding affection as punishment. Classic manipulation tactic." "I've tried to apologize, tried to make it right, but he won't even discuss it. Because he's enjoying making you suffer. Simon always struck me as the passive-aggressive type. With my mother's validation, I felt more confident in my version of events. I wasn't the cheating wife. I was the victim of an emotionally abusive husband who couldn't forgive a minor indiscretion. The narrative worked well at first. My friends rallied around me, offering support and advice. They shared their own stories of unreasonable husbands, controlling partners, men who couldn't handle their wives having any independence. But then Tom, Simon's brother, invited us to dinner. I should have seen it coming. Tom and Simon had always been close, and Tom was naturally suspicious of anyone who hurt his little brother. But I'd gotten so comfortable with my victim narrative that I walked into his house unprepared for what was coming. Evadne, Tom said after dinner, while Simon was helping his wife Sarah with the dishes and the kids were watching TV. Can we talk? Of course. We stepped out onto his back porch, and Tom's friendly demeanor evaporated. I know what happened, he said quietly. My heart raced, but I kept my expression neutral. I'm not sure what you mean. The night of your work party, I know you didn't just lose track of time. Tom, I think there's been some misunderstanding. Simon told me everything, about the hotel, about the man you left with, about how you came home the next morning wearing the same dress. The words hit like physical blows. Simon had told his brother. My private shame was now family knowledge? Whatever Simon told you, it's not the whole story, I said, switching to damage control mode. Yes, I made a mistake, but Simon's been punishing me for weeks. He won't talk to me, won't touch me, treats me like a stranger in my own home. Maybe because you betrayed him in the worst possible way. It was one night, Tom. One stupid mistake that I've apologized for 100 times. But Simon won't forgive, won't even try to work through it. He's being cruel. Tom studied my face for a long moment. Do you know what he was doing while you were in that hotel room? Sitting in his car, I assume, being dramatic about the whole thing. He was calling hospitals. He thought you might have been in an accident, or worse. He called the police at 2 a.m. to file a missing person report. My stomach dropped. He didn't tell me that. Why would he? You were busy fucking some stranger while your husband was terrified you were dead. The crude language from mild-mannered Tom shocked me more than the words themselves. Tom, please. Do you know what it's like to get a phone call at 3 a.m. from your brother, sobbing because he thinks his wife is lying in a morgue somewhere? Do you know what it's like to help him call every hospital in the city, looking for Jane Does who might match your description? I had no answer for that. And then, Tom continued, when he finally found out the truth, do you know what he did? He came to my house and sat at my kitchen table and cried. Actually cried, Evadne. I've seen my brother cry exactly 3 times in his life. When our father died, when Leela was born, and that morning. I never meant for any of that to happen, I whispered. But it did happen. And now you're going around telling people that Simon's the problem, that he's controlling and abusive. That's rich, coming from someone who disappeared for 9 hours to cheat on her husband. I'm not... Holly called Sarah yesterday. Apparently, you've been sharing quite the sob story about your terrible, unreasonable husband who won't forgive your tiny mistake. The fact that my narrative had made it back to Simon's family through the gossip network was mortifying. Tom, you don't understand the whole situation. I understand that my brother is the most patient, forgiving man I know, and if he can't get past this, it's because you've given him no reason to trust you. That's not fair. Fair? Tom's voice rose slightly. You want to talk about fair? Fair is Simon sitting in that car for 5 hours, worried sick. Fair is him having to explain to his 8-year-old daughter why Mommy didn't come home. Fair is him finding out his wife's been trash-talking him to anyone who'll listen instead of actually trying to fix their marriage. I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet. The victim narrative that had felt so solid, so justified, was crumbling under the weight of Tom's words. I am trying to fix things, I said weakly. By making Simon the villain, by convincing everyone that he's the problem. Tom shook his head in disgust. I used to think you were good for him. You challenged him, brought him out of his shell. But this is just cruel. He turned to go back inside, then paused. Simon's a good man, Evadne. Maybe the best man I know. If you can't see that, if you can't appreciate what you have, then maybe you don't deserve him. The porch door slammed behind him, leaving me alone with the devastating realization that my carefully constructed narrative was falling apart. And if Tom knew the truth, if he was willing to confront me this directly, what did that say about what Simon was planning? For the first time since that night at the hotel, I felt truly afraid. The confrontation with Tom changed everything. Within days, I could feel the shift in how people looked at me, talked to me, responded to my carefully crafted victim narrative. Word had gotten out, and not the version I'd been telling. At work, conversation stopped when I entered rooms. Holly, who had been my most sympathetic supporter, became distant and professional. Even my mother seemed less convinced of my innocence when I called her crying about Simon's continued coldness. "Honey," she said carefully, "maybe you should focus less on what Simon's doing wrong and more on making this right." "I've tried, Mum. I've apologized, I've begged, I've done everything I can think of." "Have you, though? Really?" The doubt in her voice stung worse than any accusation, but it was Lila who delivered the most devastating blow. I was tucking her into bed one night when she looked up at me with those serious 8-year-old eyes and asked, "Mummy, why did you lie about where you were that night?" My blood turned to ice. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "The night you didn't come home. You told Daddy you were with Aunt Holly, but I heard Daddy on the phone. Aunt Holly said you weren't with her." Children hear everything. They understand more than we give them credit for. And my little girl had been listening to the adult conversations, piecing together the truth that I'd been trying so hard to hide. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes," I said carefully. "Did you make a mistake?" "Yes, baby, I did." "Are you and Daddy going to get divorced?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "Why would you ask that?" "Because Tommy's parents got divorced after his mom lied about where she was. And now Daddy sleeps in the other room, and you cry a lot, and nobody talks at dinner anymore." Out of the mouths of babes, my 8-year-old daughter could see what I'd been refusing to acknowledge. Our marriage was dying, and it was my fault. That night, after Lila was asleep, I tried one more time to reach Simon. I found him in his home office, working late as had become his habit. "We need to talk," I said from the doorway. He didn't look up from his computer. "Do we?" "Yes. About us, about our marriage, about how we move forward from here." "Move forward?" He finally looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach clench. "Is that what you think we're doing?" "I hope so. I know I made a terrible mistake, Simon. I know I hurt you, but we have 10 years together. We have Lila. We have a life. That has to count for something." He leaned back in his chair, studying me like I was a problem he was trying to solve. "Tell me about Callum," he said quietly. "What?" "Callum Mercer. Tell me about him." The fact that he knew Callum's last name sent a chill down my spine. How do I know his name, his job, his address, his relationship status?" Simon's voice was eerily calm. "I'm an accountant, Evadne. Research is what I do." "You investigated him?" "I investigated the man my wife cheated with." "Yes." "Simon, Did you know he's married?" The words hit me like a slap. "What?" "Callum Mercer, married for 6 years, 2 kids, ages 4 and 6, lives in Westchester with his wife Jennifer, who teaches elementary school." I felt like I was going to be sick. "That's not—" "He didn't say." "Of course he didn't. Why would he? You were just a convenient hookup at a business party, a married woman looking for validation, willing to believe whatever story he told you." The cruelty of it was devastating. Not just what I'd done to Simon, but what had been done to me. I'd thrown away my marriage for a man who'd lied to me, used me, discarded me. "I didn't know," I whispered. "But you didn't ask, did you? You didn't care about his situation, his life, whether he had a family. You just cared about how he made you feel." "Simon, please. Do you know what else I found out about Callum?" I didn't want to know, but he was going to tell me anyway. "He does this regularly. Business parties, conferences, networking events. Married women looking for excitement, for validation, for something their husbands supposedly aren't giving them. He's got quite the system." Each word was a nail in the coffin of my self-respect. "You weren't special, Evadne. You weren't the victim of some grand romantic seduction. You were just another conquest for a serial cheater who saw you coming from across the room." I was crying now, ugly sobs that shook my whole body. "I'm sorry, I'm so, so sorry." "Are you sorry you did it? Or sorry you got caught? Both, I admitted, but mostly sorry I hurt you. Sorry I hurt us. Simon nodded slowly. At least that's honest. Can you forgive me? Can we try to work through this? I don't know, he said simply. I honestly don't know if I can get past this. But you'll try. For Lila, for our family. I've been trying, Evadne. For weeks, I've been trying to figure out how to move forward. But every time I look at you, I see you walking out of that party with him. Every time you touch me, I think about where your hands have been. Every time you say you love me, I wonder if you meant it when you said it to him. I never said I loved him. Didn't you? Not in words, maybe, but in actions. You chose him over me that night. You chose a stranger over your husband, over your daughter, over everything we've built together. It wasn't about choosing. It was exactly about choosing, and you chose him. The truth of it was undeniable. In that hotel room, in that moment, I had chosen Callum over Simon. I had chosen excitement over stability, validation over loyalty, selfishness over love. What do you want me to do? I asked desperately. How do I fix this? Simon was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was tired. I don't think you can, Evadne. I don't think either of us can. Don't say that. Please don't say that. I've been to see a lawyer. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? I needed to understand my options, legally, financially, regarding Lila. You're divorcing me. I'm considering it. Simon, no, please. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. Can we? Because from where I sit, it looks like you've spent the last month trying to make me the villain in this story instead of taking responsibility for what you did. That's not true, isn't it? Tom told me about your conversation with Holly. My mother heard from 3 different people that I'm supposedly controlling and abusive. You've been telling anyone who'll listen that I'm the problem. The shame was overwhelming. I was hurt. I was defensive. You were protecting yourself at my expense, again. I'll stop. I'll tell everyone the truth. The truth? The truth is that you cheated on your husband and then spent weeks trying to convince everyone that he was the real villain for not getting over it fast enough. Yes, I whispered. That's the truth. And now that your narrative is falling apart, now that people are starting to see through your victim act, suddenly you want to work on our marriage. I always wanted to work on our marriage. No, Evadne, you wanted me to get over it without you having to face any real consequences. You wanted forgiveness without accountability, reconciliation without change. He stood up from his desk, and I could see the exhaustion in his face. I'm tired, he said quietly. I'm tired of being hurt, tired of being angry, tired of trying to figure out how to trust you again. Most of all, I'm tired of being married to someone who sees me as the problem. I don't see you as the problem. Then why have you spent a month trying to convince everyone else that I am? I had no answer for that, no defense, no justification, no explanation that didn't make me look worse. Simon walked past me toward the door, then paused. I'm taking Lila to my mother's this weekend. When we get back, I want you to have decided what you really want. Not what you think you should want, not what looks good to other people, but what you actually want. Because I can't keep living like this. What I want is my family. What I want is us. Then you should have thought about that before you walked out of that party with another man. He left me alone in his office, surrounded by evidence of the life he'd built through careful planning and hard work. A life I'd nearly destroyed in a single night of selfishness and poor judgment. For the first time since this all began, I truly understood what I'd lost. Not just Simon's trust, not just our marriage, but the respect of our friends, the stability of our daughter's life, and most devastatingly, my own self-respect. I'd thought I was the victim in this story, but sitting there in Simon's office, surrounded by the ruins of everything I'd once taken for granted, I finally understood the truth. I was the villain, and Simon was done being the patient, forgiving husband who enabled my selfishness. The question was, what was he planning to do about it? The weekend at Janet's house stretched endlessly. Simon and Lila left Friday evening, and I spent 2 days alone in our house, rattling around like a ghost haunting the ruins of my former life. Every room held memories of happier times, and every memory felt like an accusation. I tried calling Simon several times, but he didn't answer. When I texted asking when they'd be home, he replied simply, "Sunday evening." By Sunday afternoon, I was a wreck. I'd rehearsed a dozen different speeches, practiced every possible approach to salvaging our marriage. I would be completely honest, take full responsibility, agree to counseling, do whatever it took to prove I was committed to rebuilding his trust. But when Simon and Lila finally came home, something felt different. Simon was calm in a way that made my skin crawl, and he sent Lila upstairs to play immediately, as if he'd been planning this conversation for days. "We need to talk," he said, settling into the living room chair across from me. "Yes," I agreed quickly. "Simon, I've had time to think, and I want you to know. I've made a decision." The words stopped me cold. There was something final in his tone, something that made my heart race with panic. What kind of decision? "I'm filing for divorce." Even though I'd been expecting it, hearing the words out loud was devastating. "Simon, please, just listen to me for 5 minutes. I've been listening for weeks, Evadne. I've heard your apologies, your explanations, your promises, but I've also seen your actions." "What do you mean?" He pulled out his phone and opened what looked like a recording app. "Do you remember your conversation with Holly 3 days ago? At the coffee shop on Main Street?" My blood turned to ice. "You recorded me?" "I recorded a conversation in a public place where you continued to spread lies about me." He pressed play, and I heard my own voice, tinny but clear through the phone speaker. "He's been punishing me for weeks. Won't touch me, barely speaks to me, treats me like I'm some kind of criminal. All over one mistake, Holly. One night where I stayed out too late." Holly's voice responded, "That's emotional abuse, Evie. You deserve better than that." "I know, I've tried everything to make it right, but Simon just wants to make me suffer. He's enjoying this, I think, having power over me for once." Simon stopped the recording. "One mistake? Stayed out too late?" I felt sick, hearing my own words played back, knowing how they sounded, seeing the pain in Simon's eyes as he listened to me minimize and distort what I'd done. "Simon, I was just venting. I was frustrated." "You were lying. To your friend, to yourself, and you've been lying to me." "I haven't been lying to you." "Haven't you?" He pulled out a folder from beside his chair. "Let's talk about the night of the Henderson party. You said you lost track of time, that your phone died." "It did die. After you turned it off at 11:47 p.m., I have the phone records." He slid a paper across to me. There it was, in black and white. My phone had been active until nearly midnight, receiving his calls and texts, and then suddenly went silent. "You said you were with Holly and some other women from work." "I was initially, until 10:15 p.m., when you left the party with Callum Mercer. I have security footage from the building." Another paper, grainy but unmistakable images of me and Callum leaving through a side exit. "You said you didn't know he was married." "I didn't. But you did know he was staying at the Marriott downtown, because you texted him your room number." "What? I never—" "Your phone records show a text sent to his number at 11:52 p.m. Quote, room 412. Can't wait. End quote. I stared at the paper, my own words condemning me. I'd been so drunk, so caught up in the excitement, that I'd forgotten about the text. "Simon, I can explain." "Explain what?" "How you've lied about every single aspect of that night. How you've spent weeks gaslighting me, making me think I was being unreasonable and controlling." The folder hit the coffee table with a thud that sounded like a coffin lid. Simon didn't sit. He just stood there, arms crossed, the way he stands when he's found an error in the books that can't be explained away. "How long?" I whispered. "Since the night you came home at 3:17 a.m., smelling like someone else's cologne and swearing it was just Uber sweat." I'm an accountant, Evadne. Numbers don't lie. People do. So I followed the money, the mileage, the metadata. Turns out you're not nearly as clever as you think. He flipped the folder open. Photos, screenshots, a printed Venmo trail, dinner, hotel bar, another dinner. Security cam stills from the Hilton valet stand. Me laughing in the passenger seat of a car that was definitely not an Uber. I tried the only card I had left. You spied on me. I protected myself from you. Calm, surgical. Because I knew the second I confronted you, you'd rewrite history. Call me paranoid, controlling, abusive. You'd cry to your mother, to Holly, to the entire PTA. So I waited, and I documented. He was right, I'd already started. Whisper campaigns, crocodile tears at book club. Simon's been so distant lately. I think the stress is changing him. Simon tapped a page. Your mother told mine I should be evaluated. That was a nice touch. The shame burned hotter than anger. What about Lila? My voice cracked. She'll be fine. She'll have one parent who doesn't lie to her face every day. Primary custody with me. You'll get weekends once you're stable and sober from whatever fantasy you've been chasing. You can't take my daughter. I'm not taking her. You forfeited her when you decided a drunk fling was worth more than her family. I reached for him. He stepped back like I was contagious. I'm sorry, I said. And for once, I almost meant it. You're sorry the game ended. He picked up the folder. Papers are filed. Server comes tomorrow. I'll be at the Residence Inn with Lila until you're out of the house. Take whatever you want. I don't care anymore. Simon. He stopped at the foot of the stairs. I used to think you hung the moon, he said almost gently. Turns out you just needed the dark to shine. Then he was gone. I sat there until dawn, surrounded by 8 years of marriage, reduced to exhibits A through Z. At 7:02 a.m., Lila's little voice floated down. Daddy, why is Mommy sleeping on the couch? Simon's answer was soft, steady, final. Mommy made some grown-up choices, sweetie. Today we're going on an adventure. The front door closed. The house had never sounded so empty, and for the first time in my life, I had absolutely no one left to blame.